Hello, welcome back to Bonaventure time. Today we're going still deeper into scholastic philosophy. We're just going on a run because there just hasn't been as much in scholastic philosophy that I've made, and people have just been asking for more Bonaventure, which makes me happy because I love Bonaventure and I love sharing his thoughts and his philosophy and his theology. So I'm excited that more people are actually interested in Bonaventure, and it's not just we can keep him as our channel patron. As I mentioned in the previous Bonaventure video I've made two now. As I mentioned in the previous one, he is more theological, so it's not necessarily just a purely philosophical, even though this is a philosophical podcast or a YouTube channel. Nonetheless, we make exceptions because Bonaventure is just so brilliant and he's just so amazing, and we're just going to talk about him and really show the masterful way he goes about philosophy. Because even though he unites theology and philosophy, he is very much a philosopher and uses philosophical principles. Actually, he's very Aristotelian, which is funny because a lot of people don't realize that. Anyway, we're just diving deeper into Bonaventure, and I love it. Okay, so first video I made, we talked about his proofs for God's existence. Then for the second video I just did an introduction to his metaphysics and exemplary causation, which is, if you have not checked that out, I highly recommend it. Not just because I did it, but at least if you don't want to watch my video on it, just look up Bonaventure and exemplary causation, because it's just a really cool, neat principle in metaphysics, I think. Today I just want to continue to explore Bonaventure. I made a video on Duns Scotus, but and Thomas is coming up, don't worry. Thomas Aquinas, there's more videos on him coming up, but for now, Bonaventure. So we're going to dive deeper into the Bonaventuran philosophy, which is just great. I want to go a little bit into his epistemology and kind of more flesh out the idea of divine illumination theory. I've already explained it a little bit in other videos and kind of what he means by that and maintaining an Aristotelian background, but I'll continue to explain that here and kind of go into what this means for his philosophy, and specifically epistemology, which wasn't really a distinguished discipline in the scholastic area. It was kind of, when you studied philosophy, you just studied all these different principles. Like metaphysics was very much tied to epistemology and whatnot. So, but it'll very much be more epistemological, this video, because of illumination theory, right, deals with Aristotle's epistemology, you could say, which is found in De Anima and posterior analytics, and kind of relating different things on that. So for Bonaventure, right, our ordinary human capacities, cognitive functions require divine assistance to know things with absolute certitude. And this is related, as I spoke in the other video, to his doctrine of philosophy, or his doctrine of light, his philosophy of light, and his rationes seminales and rationes aeternas and moral illumination. So there's some groundings, but he really wants to maintain this Aristotelian principle, which you can find in De Anima and posterior analytics, which is that we learn through sense experience, right? Because in sense experience, to give a nutshell of Aristotelian epistemology, right, I come to contact with the substance through my sense experience. I abstract the form from the matter, and I identify with the form. It becomes impressed into my agent intellect, right? It's something in scholastic philosophy that they call it the agent, or Aristotle, like the potential intellect, right? Because for them, we begin as a tabula rasa, right? Just blank, right? Our intellects are blank and needs to be actualized, hence potential intellect or agent intellect. And the agent intellect, in a nutshell, you could go deeper into this metaphysically, but agent intellect takes in the substance, takes in whatever objects it's doing, takes in the form, and through abstraction and through connaturality, which is another scholastic term, right? It takes in the form and then it becomes it in a sense. Not like, you see cat and you become cat in a literal sense, but epistemologically, in a sense, you do, right? You basically receive that form and then you gain knowledge, right? That's, in a nutshell, scholastic and Aristotelian epistemology. And so Bonaventure wants to maintain this, right? He doesn't want to deny the importance of this kind of epistemology that Aristotle works out and that Thomas Aquinas brilliantly lays out as well. He wants to maintain that. And if you want to look, I'd read his commentary in the sentences, and you can, I believe it's part 2, like 24 or something, around there, you'd find like that background where he speaks on this and cites Aristotle's De Anima and posterior analytics. He wants to maintain that, but he also wants to speak about how we come to know things through absolute certitude. And for him, right, philosophy's goal is oriented towards God, right? The ultimate end, the ultimate good in ethics, right? Absolute being in metaphysics, right? And so, or absolute truth in epistemology. right? You can go through them all: aesthetics, beauty, and whatnot, right? The transcendentals, right? So, in a sense, but then you speak about God as like goodness in itself, truth in itself, right? Philosophy is oriented towards this, where we have this innatism, sort of, to speak. It's not innate ideas, which is like Cartesian, where we have these innate ideas, but it's this innatism to the intellect, meaning I am meant to know these things. I desire to know truth, love, right, goodness, right? So I'm oriented towards that, and there's innatism. We can speak of the intellect. And so for him, right, philosophy is already oriented towards a goal which it cannot attain by itself. This is why he also unites theology with it, right? And so, right, and then he goes into the illumination of faith, the illumination from God, right, the doctrine of light, the incarnation, right, this fulfillment of the seminales rationes. If you're not familiar with that, I check out my other video on Bonaventure, that actualizes this, right, that brings it merit. And through that, that's illumination, right? And so we're coming to know these things. But what's very interesting is he has a very transcendental philosophy. If you're not familiar with the transcendental, I speak of it in another video. I forget what I called it. I think it's What's Philosophy Study, maybe. But essentially there are 7 transcendentals. 2 of them are debated still. But you can speak of 7 or 5, but they would be truth, or being, would be the most self-evident. Being, truth, good, thing, identity, and then thing is debated still. Is that the same thing as being or something, identity? Beauty is debated, and they speak of different levels of beauty, so that's why there's debates about it. Is it a full transcendental in the sense that Duns Scotus works out, or is it transcendental light? So that's just debated. And then what am I missing? Unity, oneness. So those are transcendentals. There's also disjunctive transcendentals, which I'll get to in a minute. Those are the transcendentals. And what I mean by him, starting with this transcendental philosophy or epistemology, right, this is how he kind of works through a certain certitude, right? Because when I take in, for example, this Aristotelian principle of epistemology, right, I perceive a substance, right, of form and matter, right, but that already presupposes a certain being, right? Being is self-evident, right? That's what they say about the transcendentals, right? Being is the first act, if you, to use Thomistic language. And being is already presupposed in my epistemology, which means what? If we think about substance here, like, okay, so what? When we think about the notion of being in the first act of epistemology, right, what grounds us then is we think about being, and then we go into what kind of being, right? We go into what they call disjunctive transcendentals. Is it act, potency, finite being, infinite being, independent, dependent, right? There's these different, what they call the disjunctive syllogisms. There's more, and I'm blanking on all of them at the moment. There's quite a few of them, but those are examples of them, right? Finite or infinite being. And what that really is getting at, what Bonaventure is getting at that, and you'd see this in Journey to the Mind of God and also his commentary in the Sentences, is what he's getting at is, right, we already perceive the defects of being, which already means we can posit something about an apprehension, which is an important way, not comprehension, an apprehension, or ecstatic knowledge for Bonaventure, however you want to call it, and an ecstatic knowledge of, right, infinite being, right? Because if we think about the defects of being, we can already in some way apprehend the perfection of being, right? So we speak of us as finite, having a finite essence, finite being, right? Which already grants us an idea through the disjunctive transcendentals to the idea of infinite being. And then we come to the transcendental. So what I mean by having a transcendental background is he's already speaking of, right, the notion of being grounded in being qua being, right? Truth, good, beauty, because they're convertible with one another, conceptually speaking. Or they're convertible with one another, but differ conceptually speaking. And so actually there's something beautiful to his epistemology, because we're actually already seeing the notion of perfect being, although it apprehends it, which by that, when I speak of apprehension, ecstatic knowledge, right, there's things like that we comprehend, like 2 + 2 or 3 + 4 = 7, 2 + 2 = 4, right? And we comprehend that, right? We totally grasp it, right? But there are things like right, God, right, are it's a very beautiful thing. There are some things that we don't know, we can only apprehend. You can almost think about this as, like, right, coming to know infinite being, right? We in some way Bonaventure would say in his proof for God's existence, that we come to know God. But he doesn't obviously mean we come to comprehend God and fully encircle him. What he means is something higher brings us up into the reality, right? So it's not something initiated on our part, but actually God brings us up into this sort of ecstatic knowledge, as Bonaventure calls it. It's a very neat principle. And that's what he means by that, right? We come to know, right, in a sense, perfect being through the defects of being. We know that we can posit that there is perfection of being. And from that perfection of being, we come to the transcendentals, which are the characteristics of being in its perfection, right? And so there's something very beautiful to his epistemology, because even though we're starting with a philosophy united with theology, there's something very significantly grounded, philosophically speaking, in his epistemology, even though we're speaking of a divine illumination theory, right? And I hope you can see that, right? Because this is a far advancement beyond modern epistemologies. And it's something also, though, grounded still in Aristotelian epistemology, far different from Platonic epistemology too as well. So I think there's something very beautiful about that in his divine illumination theory, is that you actually have this grounding in Aristotelian principles, and it's very philosophically grounded epistemologically speaking, because it's grounded in the transcendentals, right, which are self-evident, Thomas Aquinas would say, and Bonaventure would say, right? These are self-evident things, and you can come to know substance. Being is presupposed, and you go through the disjunctive syllogisms, and you come to infinite being, and then we come to this illumination, right? To be brought up into the reality of something that we can't fully comprehend, but we desire to come to know. So in a nutshell, that's Bonaventurean epistemology, and that's kind of fleshing out this divine illumination theory, which I think is a very beautiful thing. I hope this video helps, and please comment what else you would like to know, or any other philosophers you'd like to know about, and I really hope that this helps, and please like it, please share it if you do like it, and if you have not already, please subscribe, and I hope you have a good day. God bless.